the program featuring the news and interests of the African American community. Here's your host, Sandra Bookman.
Coming up, Senator Kamala Harris, the first black woman on a major party's presidential ticket. Can Biden-Harris beat Trump-Pence? Later, celebrating the evolution of black culture by going beyond the narrative of slavery and civil rights. FIT's Black Student Union presents the exhibition Black in Time. Also ahead, embracing our roots, the game-changing developments in the natural hair movement. And Grammy Award-winning jazz bassist Christian McBride. That's all ahead on Here and Now.
Well, is the answer yes?
The answer is absolutely yes, Joe.
A history-making moment made big news. Joe Biden chose Senator Kamala Harris to be his running mate, the first black woman on a major party's presidential ticket. Of course, the big question now, can Biden-Harris beat Pence-Trump? Joining us now to weigh in on that question, Dr. Basil Smikle, a political analyst, and Robert George, editorial board member for the New York Daily News. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us again.
Pleasure.
I want to say that Kamala Harris's pick as VP was a big surprise. Was it to either of you?
I'll just say, as the lead up to all of this, there was certainly a lot of attention. She was one of maybe three people that I thought would get the nod. It's certainly not a surprise that she did. She's a known entity to the entire country, certainly to Democrats. She's clearly someone who's unafraid of battle, having gone after Joe Biden himself in that first debate. And I think she is going to be a tremendous surrogate in terms of fundraising, in terms of being able to, go after Donald Trump. And we all look forward to that debate with Mike Pence, assuming that actually goes down. So I think she's an excellent choice, and certainly one that we were looking at.
And Robert, you think she's
in the context of how you phrase this, she was the biggest surprise for anybody who was not paying attention for the last 2 years.
Right.
2 years ago, people were saying, "Well, Biden and Harris makes a whole lot of sense." A year ago, or less than a year ago, after the first debate, even after the two of them went at it, they said, "Oh, this still makes perfect sense." As it got closer, there were a lot of these little twists and turns with Karen Bass was mentioned, and Susan Rice apparently was a last minute name in there. But no, it makes perfect sense. Look, she went through the early parts of the pre-primary session, and unfortunately, her campaign was not successful. But she was in a bunch of those debates. She gave as good as she got, and I think she's probably improved because of that. And I think a lot of people will be, and people also know her from the fact that she really goes after people in some of the congressional hearings, and they'll probably want to see that same kind of fire on the campaign trail, and as Basil said, in the debate against Mike Pence.
Does it make Joe Biden, Robert, in your estimation, an even more formidable candidate against Donald Trump?
Yes. Well, one of the, and my friend Basil knows this too, one of the first rules of selecting your running mate is first do no harm. And Kamala Harris definitely does no harm, and she brings a lot of attributes to it. She's unafraid. She's unafraid to give a punch and to take a punch. And as everybody's been talking about over the last couple of days, her life story of being the daughter of dual immigrants, half Jamaican, as a Trinidadian, I won't hold that against her. Just say that half Jamaican, half Indian, and it sounds like, you know, her mom was like a real stickler for education, and and she made an interesting dynamic choice in terms of embracing the Black experience in America. You know, she at 18 decides to go to Howard. She decides to pledge AKA. So she, when people talk about the immigrant experience in America, they talk about the need to assimilate into America. A lot of folks, a lot of people on the immigration side, whether they're on the conservative side or on the progressive side, they don't realize the added burden that Black immigrants have in terms of assimilating not only into America, but also into assimilating into Black America. And Kamala Harris, and I say that, look, I was born in Trinidad. My mom and I moved to England when I was a year old. We came to the States when I was 8, and I had a steep learning curve. And Kamala Harris made a bold choice that I wasn't smart enough to do when I was 18, and she went to a Black college because she realized it was important to know about that side of the Black experience, and I think that's great. I think that's a great attribute and a great story that she's able to bring to the campaign.
Now, I want to ask you, Basil, she does come with a little bit of baggage, and she's been questioned about this over the years, her record as a prosecutor. And so some have raised concerns as to whether or not a lingering feeling and questions about whether or not she's done enough to actually make some of those changes that are being talked about in the criminal justice system, or if she's just been part of that system. How do you see her handling those questions and answering them satisfactorily for people? And will you think that it all turns off some of the voters that the Biden-Harris ticket need?
No, it's an interesting and important question, because certainly if you look through social media, while she was running for the presidency, a lot of this came up. You'd see a lot of threads on social media. There were a couple of articles that talked about this very issue. To be honest, I didn't think that she should have bared the burden for the criminal justice system that is inherently unfair to communities of color and to Black men specifically. One of the things that came out of in the protests and the discussion after the killing of George Floyd was that 95% of the elected prosecutors in this country are white. Think about that. 95%, and less than 2% are actually less than 1%, if I remember the quote correctly, are African American women. And so my point is that the system itself is problematic, and the folks who are in these positions are doing the best they can with a system that is inherently dysfunctional and racist. So I absolutely believe that she understands that. She acknowledges it. And I don't think that you will find a stronger champion, certainly among the top tier Democrats, as she will be in terms of reforming of the criminal justice system. And I'll just add this very quick point. I think that we also have to be careful with who's putting forth these arguments, because there's a lot of information that's out there right now, and they're memes, they're these very pithy statements that we're seeing again on social media, and we don't really know where they're coming from, or we may have some sense of where they're coming from. But we have to really be careful that we don't take memes for knowledge and research. And that's a critically important point in this point in history, particularly when you have a president who, we have concerns about his relationship with Russians and bots and things like that. So, it's important to make that point.
No, that's exactly right. When Harris's presidential campaign was still active in the summer and fall of last year, it was quite clear that there was whether it was Russia or whatever, there was very much a bot campaign that was going on, and it was clear that it was being used to try and draw wedges, not just between Harris and progressives, but Harris and the Black community. And so it was the meme was there was the Kamala is a cop meme. There was also the is she really Black because she's got two immigrant parents and so forth. So yeah, and it was fascinating. You know, just like a switch goes off, you saw those same kind of lines of attack popping back up within minutes after the appointment, after the announcement on Tuesday.
I want to ask both of you, the young vote, it's always important, but especially important this year, I think. What would Biden and Harris have to do to win enough of that vote to win?
So I start with this point. If I zoom out a little bit, there have been a lot of polls that have suggested that Donald Trump's support is more enthusiastic about his candidacy than Joe Biden's support is enthusiastic about his. So I actually think that the Harris choice as VP injects a fair amount of enthusiasm, quite frankly, into the Democratic ticket. When you have 70% of the country saying that the nation's going in the wrong direction, I think this also gives a bit of an emotional boost to the nation and could start the conversation around healing, not just in terms of racial healing and ethnic and class healing, but also trying to get back to some semblance of normalcy. I'm not sure how much of that we'll actually get to do, but I do think that young voters, quite frankly, are, they are hit by, think about what they've been going through, the fact that they are young people in this country who've seen the Great Recession. They've seen an African-American president, the first in our nation's history, and a pandemic, and the killings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and so many others. They've experienced a tremendous amount of political shock and trauma. And I think for them, staying out of this race is something that they feel they can't afford to do. And so I think what they're realizing that the stakes are very high. And I would hate to know that, a young person or someone who had been a lapsed voter would say, I'm not going to vote because I don't like Kamala Harris. Particularly when so much research says it's really about the person at the top of the ticket. And if you're going to say, you're going to draw a false equivalency between anything that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have done and what President Trump has not only said, but done in office, then I think we have real problems of real education to engage in. But I do expect young voters to come out, and I do expect the enthusiasm to be substantial.
We can hope we hope they can. We hope they do. The issue, of course, is Bernie was selling himself as the person who can engage and inspire young voters, and they didn't turn out for him, or they didn't turn out in sufficient number. But the truth of the matter is that Joe. The young, if you just look at the polls, younger voters, 18 to 24, 18 to 30, whatever you want to cut it, they are very clearly showing a preference for Joe Biden, and by extension the Biden-Harris ticket. The difference is, though, Joe Biden is much more competitive with middle-aged voters and with senior voters than Hillary Clinton was. So they are not dependent on younger voters, but obviously they're going to do everything they can in their power to get them out. And if you look at that field that ran against Joe Biden, there are a lot of people there who, if they're deployed strategically, they can try and inspire some of their voters. The Yang Gang, Bernie's people, Buttigieg's people, and so forth. There's a pretty good Democratic field force out there.
I want one last thing before you go. Certainly, Kamala Harris's selection is some recognition of the fact that Black women have long been stalwarts in the Democratic Party. so Black women fired up about this. Trump's already started with the nastiness, using that word specifically, phony. How much of that kind of language do you think will work for him, or will it work for him this time around? Are people going to be as amused as they seem to be with his name-calling tactics the last election cycle?
Well, I would say this. If you go back to some of the points that Robert made, and you look at the support that Trump is losing, he's losing support in the suburbs, he's losing support among white women, he's losing support among older Americans, in part because they don't like his tactics. They don't like the chaos that he brings to governance. They are concerned about his handling of the virus. And I would say this, his numbers are still fairly high. What I mean by that is fairly normal in terms of his handling of the economy. But he gets low marks from voters with respect to handling of the virus. So, and what I mean, so I say that to say that it's his governance strategy and the lies and the tactics, the misinformation that voters are responding to and saying, you know what, we can't with this guy. And so I imagine that he is going to roll out a lot of those same comments. Owing to Robert's point earlier in talking about Kamala Harris's heritage, I'm a child of Jamaican immigrants. I just have to say that. And so this is a very proud moment for me and my family. But he is going. I expect even some sliver of the birtherism comments are going to start filtering out again. Is she really American? Can she really be president if something goes wrong? And then sort of attack using that as a way to get into Joe Biden's mental acuity, which is also a ridiculous argument for me. And so I think when you put all those things together, I expect you're going to see a lot of the same misogyny and sexism that we saw with Hillary Clinton, that we saw going all the way back to Geraldine Ferraro and so many others who've run for so many other women who've run for office in the past. When you layer on top of that, the fact that she is a Black woman, I think we're in for a very rough ride coming from Trump and some of his supporters. And that's why I say to all of my friends, you must stay vigilant, stay active, stay focused.
All right. Thank you both. I'm going to have to wrap it up, but I'm going to have you both back.
Absolutely.
Anytime.
It's going to be an interesting fall.
That's
an understatement.
An understatement.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Here and Now will be right back.
Slavery and